The laugh was sharp, dismissive, and cruel. Justice William Alsup leaned back in his chair, his grin spreading across the chamber as if victory was already his. The sound echoed in the room, a laugh not of humor, but of arrogance. Cameras flashed, pens froze above notepads, and even the audience shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew this wasn't just a laugh. It was a mockery. It was the kind of laugh meant to belittle, to crush dignity, to remind Jasmine Crockett that in his eyes, she didn't belong. But then she looked up. No panic, no hesitation, no anger, just a calm, steady gaze that sliced through the noise. Jasmine didn't flinch, she waited. Her silence was more deafening than his laugh. For a single, electric second, the entire chamber held its breath. And then she began to speak. Her words didn't come out in anger. They came out in power. Slow, deliberate, unshakable. Every sentence landed like a strike. Every pause built unbearable suspense. The smile that Alsup wore so proudly, it didn't just fade, it collapsed. His laugh, the one meant to humiliate her, had just set the stage for his own destruction. "You think this is a joke?" she asked, her voice rising, measured, slicing through the air. "You laugh at me, but you're laughing at every voice I represent. And that," she leaned forward, eyes locked on him, "is something you will regret." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Even the cameras seemed to zoom closer, desperate not to miss a single second. The tension wasn't just felt, it was suffocating. What had started as a moment of mockery had transformed into a battlefield. Because Jasmine Crockett wasn't just replying to a laugh. She was fighting for dignity itself. And what came next would leave the entire country stunned. The laugh may have sounded casual, but its meaning was anything but. To many watching on television, Alsup's grin looked like the grin of a man untouchable, a man who thought power was his birthright, who believed dignity could be crushed with a chuckle. But to those inside the chamber, it became clear this wasn't just a clash of words. This was a clash of identities, of values, of what America truly stood for. Jasmine Crockett didn't represent herself alone. She carried the voices of communities silenced too long. The weight of generations told they didn't belong in those very chambers. Every look aimed at her was a reminder of battles fought outside those walls. Battles for justice, equality, and truth. And Alsup's laugh? It was a symbol of the arrogance that for too long had drowned out those voices. The tension wasn't confined to the room. Across the nation, people were already reacting. Social media timelines lit up within minutes. "Did you hear that laugh? Disgusting. Pure arrogance. She better clap back because this can't go unanswered." Audiences who had tuned in casually suddenly leaned forward, unable to look away. Reporters exchanged glances, already knowing tomorrow's headlines would be written tonight. Everyone was waiting for what Jasmine would do next. And here's where the stakes rose higher. Alsup wasn't just a judge. He wasn't just an elder statesman. He was a man who had shaped rulings, influenced decisions, and carried a reputation of being untouchable. For years, his smirk had silenced countless challengers. But tonight, his arrogance had met its match. Because Jasmine wasn't here to play his game. She was here to change it. Every word she was about to deliver wasn't just for him. It was for every single person watching at home who had ever been laughed at, dismissed, or told they weren't enough. Her reply had the power to shift the narrative, to turn a chamber laugh into a nationwide rallying cry. And Alsup, he didn't see it coming. He leaned back, still confident, still grinning, the grin of a man who believed he had already won. But behind Jasmine's calm eyes was a storm. The chamber may not have realized it yet, but history was about to be made. The laugh that had started as a weapon was about to boomerang back, crushing its owner with the weight of truth. And when her first words landed, they would do more than silence him. They would ignite a fire that echoed across America. But how did a single exchange escalate into one of the most unforgettable courtroom moments in modern history? To understand that, we need to look deeper at the man behind the laugh. Every great showdown needs a villain, and in this story, that role was never in doubt. For years, Justice William Alsup carried himself like a man beyond reproach. To his supporters, he was the sharp legal mind who could dismantle arguments with a flick of his hand. To his critics, however, he was something else entirely, a man intoxicated by the sound of his own voice, a figure who confused arrogance for authority. Alsup's reputation didn't emerge overnight. It was built case by case, moment by moment, on a pattern the public had come to know too well. He wielded his bench not just as a seat of justice, but as a stage, a place where he could flex his intellect, cut down challengers, and remind the room who truly held the power. Colleagues whispered about his smirks during testimony, his tendency to interrupt, the way he'd chuckle at opposing counsel like they were children fumbling in a game they didn't understand. For him, it wasn't just about rulings. It was about dominance. But beneath the surface, a more troubling picture emerged. Time and again, Alsup's words betrayed something darker, a dismissiveness toward those who didn't fit neatly into his worldview. Activists, minority leaders, young politicians, they were often brushed aside as idealists or inexperienced voices. His laughter wasn't new. It was part of a pattern, a weapon used to belittle, to shrink, to remind others of their supposed place. And the public had noticed. Clips of his sharp interjections floated online, sometimes sparking outrage, sometimes just resigned sighs of classic Alsup. Memes showed him leaning back with that smug grin, captions reading, "Case closed." Because I said so. But here's the irony. The same arrogance that had once cemented his image as a courtroom giant was slowly turning into his weakness. Every time he laughed off an opponent, he underestimated them. Every time he smirked, he revealed a blind spot. And on this night, in this chamber, that blind spot had a name, Jasmine Crockett. Because what Alsup failed to understand was that times had changed. The country he thought he could still mock in his silence was no longer willing to stay quiet. Social media had given every dismissive chuckle a second life. His arrogance was now instantly magnified, dissected, and ridiculed by millions. His laugh wasn't just a laugh, it was a spark. And this time, it was about to ignite an inferno. Viewers across America didn't just see a judge smiling. They saw every teacher who mocked them for speaking up in class. They saw every boss who dismissed their ideas in a meeting. They saw every official who acted like power was their birthright. Alsup, in that one smirk, became the embodiment of the old guard. Powerful, entitled, unbothered. And yet, behind all the confidence, there was fear. Fear of being challenged. Fear of losing the dominance he had built over decades. Fear that one day, someone would step forward who wouldn't flinch, wouldn't shrink, wouldn't let the laugh control the narrative. That day had arrived, because Jasmine Crockett wasn't intimidated, and that was new for him. For years, his arrogance had worked like a spell. One smirk, one sarcastic laugh, and opponents stumbled, second-guessed, or lost composure. But Jasmine's calm gaze cut through the facade. She wasn't just hearing a laugh. She was hearing the echoes of generations who had been laughed at and kept moving anyway. This wasn't just about her versus Alsup. This was dignity versus mockery, justice versus arrogance, the past clashing with the future. And when that collision came, Alsup would discover what arrogance never prepares you for, the power of someone who refuses to bow. But before we witness Jasmine's storm, we need to understand her strength. The story of how she became the one voice Alsup could never silence. Before Jasmine Crockett walked into that chamber, she carried with her a story far bigger than the moment itself. She was not born into privilege, not handed shortcuts or easy applause. Her rise was carved out of grit, long nights of study, endless community battles, and the constant fight to prove that dignity and truth could thrive even in the toughest arenas. From the start, Jasmine understood what it meant to be underestimated. She knew the sting of being spoken over, laughed at, brushed aside. But each of those moments became fuel. Instead of folding, she sharpened her voice. Instead of retreating, she built resilience. By the time she stepped onto the national stage, she wasn't just another politician. She was a fighter forged by fire. Her work wasn't abstract. It was grounded in real people, real struggles. Families pushed aside by unfair systems. Communities silenced by leaders who pretended not to hear. She listened, she carried those stories, and when she spoke, her words were never just her own. They were echoes of thousands. And that's what made her dangerous to someone like Alsup. Because Jasmine didn't enter the chamber seeking his approval. She didn't come to bow. She came as the voice of the very people he thought could be dismissed with a grin. Her calm was her weapon. Her truth was her shield. And her determination, that unshakable refusal to bend, was the storm waiting to strike. The question wasn't if Jasmine would respond to Alsup's laugh. The real question was how devastating her reply would be. The room was tense even before the words were spoken. The air felt heavy, as if everyone could sense that a confrontation was inevitable. And then it happened. The smirk, the laugh, that casual dismissal from Alsup. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. But it carried the same weight it always did. A signal that he believed the conversation was already beneath him. To him, Jasmine was simply another opponent to brush aside. Really? He chuckled, shaking his head ever so slightly. It was the kind of laugh that didn't just challenge arguments. It challenged dignity itself. For a split second, the room froze. Eyes darted between the two figures. Would Jasmine falter? Would she retreat, like so many before her had? But Jasmine didn't blink. Her silence in that moment spoke louder than any interruption. She let the laugh linger in the air, let the arrogance reveal itself. And as the pause stretched, something shifted. The audience leaned forward, sensing that the script was about to flip. Alsup pressed further, his tone dripping with superiority. Maybe you should review your facts before lecturing us on matters you clearly don't understand. The words were sharp, but the delivery was sharper, a dismissal packaged as advice. It was arrogance masquerading as wisdom. And yet, Jasmine remained composed. Her calm presence wasn't weakness, it was power. Her eyes locked on him, steady and unflinching, as if to say, "You've made your move. Now watch mine." That composure rattled Alsup more than any outburst could have. He expected anger, defensiveness, maybe even stammering. What he didn't expect was silence that cut deeper than words. And then Jasmine began to speak. Slowly, deliberately, each word chosen with surgical precision. Her tone was firm but respectful, laced with the authority of someone who knew the truth was on her side. Every sentence dismantled his assumptions piece by piece, building suspense with every pause. The audience could feel the balance shifting. What began as Alsup's stage was transforming before their eyes. The grin that once commanded the room was losing its power. His interruptions sounded less like authority and more like desperation. Tension was at its peak. Viewers knew the storm was coming. Jasmine's restraint wasn't weakness. It was the calm before the strike. And when the strike came, it would leave the entire chamber, and the nation stunned. The moment Alsup's laughter faded, Jasmine struck. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She leaned into the silence he had created, and then, with unwavering calm, began dismantling him piece by piece. "Judge," she said firmly, her tone carrying the weight of every silenced voice in the room. "What you just laughed at wasn't me. It was the truth." The room shifted instantly. The smirk on Alsup's face faltered for the first time. The laughter that was meant to crush her had instead given her the stage. She pressed on, her words precise and unshakable. "You may dismiss facts with a smile. You may belittle voices with a laugh. But what you cannot do is erase reality. And the reality is this. The people I speak for are watching, and they're tired of being laughed at." Gasps rippled across the chamber. Some leaned back in disbelief. Others leaned forward, captivated. The tension wasn't just rising, it was exploding. Alsup tried to cut in, raising his hand, but Jasmine didn't flinch. Her voice grew sharper, stronger. "Every time leaders like you laugh at justice, you reveal your fear. Fear that your old way of doing things is dying. Fear that your power no longer silences those who dare to stand. Fear that the future doesn't belong to arrogance, it belongs to truth." The crowd buzzed. Whispers turned into murmurs. Phones lit up as people captured the moment, knowing it was history in the making. And then came the line that would echo across social media, news outlets, and living rooms nationwide. You laughed at me, Judge Alsup. But remember this. No one ever changed the course of history with a laugh. Change only comes when someone stands up, stares arrogance in the face, and refuses to bow. The chamber erupted. Some clapped. Others cheered under their breath. Onlookers exchanged stunned glances. Jasmine had flipped the script completely. Alsup sat back, his face suddenly devoid of humor. The grin that once defined him had vanished. His silence now told the story, a silence louder than any laugh. For Jasmine, it wasn't just a victory. It was a turning point, a single mic drop moment that transformed her from a challenger into a symbol. And for Alsup, it was the beginning of the end. But the true shockwaves of this moment wouldn't stop here. What came next would spill far beyond the chamber walls, into headlines, hashtags, and households across America. The moment Jasmine's words landed, the chamber buzzed like an electric current. But what no one inside could have predicted was how quickly that current would surge across the nation. Within minutes, clips of her reply hit social media. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Everywhere, timelines lit up with the same video. Alsup laughing, Jasmine holding steady, and then unleashing her thunder. The caption said it all. When arrogance laughs, dignity answers. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Jasmine destroys Alsup. Hashtag laughing judge. Hashtag truth over arrogance. Memes spread like wildfire, showing Alsup's smirk fading into shock. One viral edit looped his laugh immediately before Jasmine's mic drop line, ending with a freeze frame on his stunned face. Millions watched. Millions shared. News outlets scrambled to cover the story. Commentators on both sides admitted, whether they agreed with Jasmine's politics or not, that the moment was unforgettable. A CNN analyst called it a generational takedown. A Fox host, visibly rattled, conceded she caught him off guard, and the world saw it. Celebrities chimed in too. Actors, musicians, athletes tweeted their support. "That's how you do it," wrote one superstar. Another posted, "Respect to Jasmine. Fearless, calm, unstoppable." But the true impact wasn't just in headlines or hashtags. It was in living rooms across the country. Parents replayed the clip for their kids, pointing to Jasmine as proof that dignity beats mockery. College students passed it around as inspiration before debates. Communities who had long felt laughed at finally saw someone stare that laugh down and win. Alsup had entered the chamber with power. He left with silence. Jasmine had walked in underestimated. She walked out as a symbol, and the ripple effects were only just beginning. Because what Jasmine turned into a single unforgettable moment would soon become a rallying cry heard far beyond those four walls. When the noise of the chamber faded and the headlines cooled, what remained was the lesson. Jasmine's response was more than just a clapback to a laughing judge. It was a reminder that dignity does not bow to arrogance, that truth is never silenced by mockery, and that calm courage always outlasts cheap theatrics. Alsup's laugh was meant to diminish her. Instead, it exposed him. It showed the nation what happens when power grows complacent, when authority mistakes itself for immunity. And Jasmine's reply showed what happens when someone dares to hold that arrogance accountable. For millions watching, the takeaway was clear. You don't need to shout to be strong. You don't need to match mockery with mockery. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is unshakable calm, followed by a truth so undeniable it leaves the room in silence. Parents told their children, "See this? This is how you answer disrespect. Not with anger, but with strength." Teachers shared the clip as proof that intelligence and composure can dismantle arrogance. Communities carried the moment as proof that the future belongs not to those who laugh at others, but to those who stand for them. And maybe that's why the clip wouldn't fade. Because in that exchange, people saw more than Jasmine versus Alsup. They saw themselves, their struggles, their dignity, their refusal to be dismissed. The laugh was temporary, but the lesson? Eternal. And it's a lesson the world will carry long after the echo of that laugh has been forgotten as, oh, there it was. A single laugh, followed by a single reply, that flipped the balance of power. Alsup walked in believing his smirk would end the debate. Jasmine walked out proving that dignity and truth will always have the last word. And that's why this moment matters. It wasn't just about one judge, one politician, or one debate. It was about something bigger, the fight between arrogance and dignity, between old power and new courage. The world saw what happened when arrogance tried to laugh off justice. And the world saw what happened when dignity refused to bow. Now the question is, where do you stand? If you believe dignity is stronger than arrogance, if you believe truth outlasts mockery, then don't just watch this moment. Be part of it. Share it. Talk about it. Carry it forward. Because history isn't written by those who laugh the loudest. It's written by those who stand the strongest. This is more than a debate. It's a reminder. And it's just the beginning. Subscribe now, join the movement, and never let arrogance have the final word again.